All right, peeps, we're back. We are live yet again. Yet again, we're back with the COVID cabal. Back with the COVID cabal. As you can probably tell, my voice is still a bit shot, and so I got myself some Campbell mug. I got myself some lemon ginger honey tea to try to massage out that laryngitis that's been haranguing me these past 2 weeks. When you're in, leave a comment. Drop a comment when you're in the chat. Drop a comment in the chat. Drop a comment in the chat, guys. Drop a comment in the chat. Once you are here, drop the comment. Drop those comments. Drop those comments. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. Drop comments. Drop a comment in the chat. Let's go. Where are these comments? Let's go, let's go, let's go. I'm not seeing a single comment here. All right, there we go. Yeah, it's coming. ARVP, what's up, my man? Anon 141414. It's good to see you. Diesel shortage, crypto class. I'm closing. Why could this be an hour? Gonna catch a replay. Maybe we'll still be here, Jose. Maybe. Hopefully not, for my voice's sake. All right. Let's dive into this sucker. So it seems like every week we got a new update. You know, we got a couple little things, of course, that drip out most days, but every week we got some new. I don't like anons. I don't mind anons. Got no issue with anons. Why wouldn't I like anons? I don't know where you got that from. Every week we got a new story, and last week was Roe versus Wade being leaked, and of course we have the after effects of that. A lot of people mad online, mad in real life. You know, now threatening the judges. Very interesting what stuff gets prosecuted and what stuff doesn't. I'll just leave it at that. Very interesting to see that, isn't it? In, you know, the United States of America. But at any rate, the big news here, we got two bits of news, but the big one is the crypto crash and the increasing awareness of shortages. So we got this diesel shortage. Hova 305, what's up, man? What's up? With the diesel shortage and baby formula shortage, very, very big deal. I mean, I'm obviously a big proponent of breastfeeding, but I understand people have their own situations, and you just can't switch it over. You know, that's one of the big things, that if for whatever reason you did decide to do formula you can't just go back to breastfeeding because the breast shuts down. So we have that's a pretty serious situation if you're a parent. So all of this stuff is on the backs of this massive crypto crash. Now, let's talk about this for a second, because if you're like me and like many of us, you probably took a little bit of a haircut with that crash. Of course, a lot of you guys, understandably, wouldn't liquidate. But look, I was. So let's talk about this stuff for a second. I mean, I'm not going to go too much into the Luna Terra thing because, to be honest, I only somewhat understand it. Like, I get it with the stable coins, and I get people were trying to pull out and the stable coin broke. That's essentially it. They couldn't keep the peg. But I'll be honest, I don't even entirely understand stable coins. I initially thought that stable coins existed so that if you were doing trades, you could just convert to stables rather than going to dollars. But that doesn't matter because when you convert tokens, it still is a tax event. So I don't entirely understand stable coins still. So, Captain Horatius, this is all true. And I know that Citadel has been implicated in the whole situation. And there's no question a lot of this crypto crash has been orchestrated. But, and again, it's not financial advice. And to be honest, guys, you don't want to take any specific financial advice from me. I mean, I see the big term trends. I know where stuff is going. But trying to predict the timing of it and the sequence of it is really difficult, as you could tell. I mean, as far as I know, the only person who expected at the cusp of the year, like during the last big rally in December, who said sell all your coins and maybe stocks too, and that things were going to get bad in 2022. And that was Gary Grinberg from GG33. He predicted accurately that there was going to be deflation when a lot of us were very focused on inflation. Now, it's not that we didn't know that there was going to be that there wasn't this issue of deflation. We've known the entire time that there's deflation and inflation both going on, and that actually a lot of the reason that they've been printing so much money since the financial crisis in 2008 is because as America has stopped producing stuff and as there have been less and less people in the workforce, that we've been experiencing deflation. Also, demographically, a more aging society encourages deflation. I mean, look, we're all here on board with the conspiracies and stuff like that. But there is also just you can actually make a normie argument for some of the things that the Fed's done, in the sense that these policymakers, in the sense that they want more mass migration because their entire paradigm is they have to avoid deflation. Now, let's be honest here. Deflation isn't necessarily bad. Let's look at Japan. Since their crash in the 80s, they've had about 20 to 30 years of a deflationary environment. And deflation, what happens is that living standards just go up, right? I mean, they pay less and less for stuff. So, there's a high savings rate. They don't consume a lot, but what they consume, the price goes down. There's a lot of arguments to be made for it. The main reason the Fed and policymakers don't like deflation is because there's no tax revenue when the economy doesn't grow. prices going down for consumers isn't a bad thing for consumers, but it is a bad thing if you're taxing profit, right? Because tax you can't tax a downward shift in price. You can't tax a downward shift in income if that income actually produces more. So you see the entire taxation financial system is based on there needing to be some inflation because of how they extract money from us. So I say all that stuff. Deflation isn't necessarily bad, but in this context, it's going to be bad because we're having deflation with all of this money that's been printed. I mean, all of the enormous amount of money that's been printed. It's still not enough to overcome what's going to happen and what we're just seeing the beginnings of now. This recession, which will go into probably a global depression, because you're going to see oil and gas from Russia banned, and you're going to see food shortages, and you're going to see the continued issues with fertilizer and semiconductors and various commodities in the global supply chain. And basically, there's going to be legitimate shortages of stuff, and there is going to be a lack of production because there isn't the ability to get parts or energy. And so it's going to cause this. Now, this was the big thing, and no one was certain about it because we all know that the Fed loves to print money, and the Fed was going to print money. You know, they raised things 0.25%. They raised the baseline a quarter, right? And then they raised it 0.5 just recently, and it broke the market. Now, people were wondering how much it was going to take. It took 0.75% interest rate to break the market. That's how overextended and messed up it is. Jeff, I don't know. It sucks. I'm sorry it's happening to you, man. But I just gave a little macroeconomic breakdown, something that you don't know about, just about how the role of deflation and taxation. So a lot of people were expecting them to just, the second that there was any sign of instability, that they were going to, well, first off, that they might not have even raised the rates at all. They would have just kept printing. But now the plan is becoming much more clear. And they want to break this. They actually do want to break the economy that they've, let me take a step back. How do you inflict maximum damage? So they've already excessively inflated the economy. There's too much inflation. So they have two options. They either print a ton more money and try to counteract it that way, and then you have serious currency debasement. And that's why everybody was like, we got to get into crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever. Any kind of crypto that doesn't have unlimited supply like Doge, right? Get into crypto and get into gold, silver. That was the whole idea behind it, because they're just going to debase the currency to deal with all the economic problems that they cause. But here's the issue. That causes damage, no question. But how do you really cause acute pain? I mean, that'll start to eat away. It'll get people upset. But even all that money printing during a deflationary cycle, it's going to be economic malaise, but it's not like brutal pain for people, right? So the other option was to do the long-needed market correction from all the money printing and to taper off, let the market break, and then try to fix it. That would have been what we should have done in 2008. We would have been okay now if that had occurred. But they're not going to taper break the economy and then let it reset. What they're going to do is they're going to break the economy. I wouldn't be surprised if, even as we see the economy shaking right now, I think there's people who think, oh, the Fed's going to, you know, go back and they're gonna pull back again, right? They're gonna start to print more money, and they're gonna pull back the rates and reassure the markets. No, I actually think they're gonna do what's in the Fed charter, and I think now they're going to raise interest rates again, and then they're gonna completely smash the economy. Now, that would be good if the intent was to do a structural reset. But you know what they're going to do, right? They're going to break the economy, and then they're going to do exactly what they did in 2008, 2009 on steroids. And we're going to have hyperinflation. So we're going to have deflation, or what you might call disinflation. Because think about this. You can have a massive increase in the money supply, but if there's no products to buy, if there's nothing to produce, then you're going to have deflation anyway. This happened in the late 1940s. And there's a good YouTube account that really went and explained this. I think his name is George Gammon. And very, very interesting, talking about how you basically had the real rates, like people were losing 17% basically on their money with the rates, but even with all of that, there was still deflation. There was still deflation temporarily, because, and the explanation in that case was because we had I'm kind of mixing this up. Anyway, whatever. Watch the video. I don't want to like. I think basically what happened. I'm trying to remember with the numbers that I know that we were producing so much at that point because at the end of World War II. So I think it was that we were producing a ton, but the interest rates were ridiculously high, and something like that. So I think it's kind of like the inverse of the current scenario. At any rate, it doesn't matter. The point is that you can have inflationary pressures and still get deflation. So we are going to see deflation over the coming months. And by the way, I just want to say, it's always good when you watch something to then try to explain it again, because then you realize that you didn't fully absorb it. So I'm going to actually go back and watch that video, because in my mind I thought I had it understood, and I tried to explain and I realized I don't fully have that example he gave from the late 1940s understood. Only got it's just interesting to think about. Anyway, so yeah, we're going to have massive deflation or disinflation, right? And when I say disinflation, we're still going to continue to have inflation, but now we're going to have a recession on top of it. The inflation rate will slow as we fall into the recession, because there's going to be such a crash in production. Bob, the guy's name is George Gammon, and he's doing this back and forth with Peter Schiff. Peter Schiff isn't actually there, but he's kind of having a fake dialogue with Peter Schiff based on some of his comments recently. So, Captain Horatius, I believe we're going to get some serious money printing. I don't think it's going to happen until maybe the end of the year, or maybe even early 2023. There's no question we are getting QE infinity, but they want to tank the stock market first. And again, as I said, never look to me for financial advice. I don't get it all right. But I think personally it's worth taking, unless you've been into Bitcoin or whatever cryptos for so long. I think it's personally worth, well, you know what? Depends on your situation. If you've got tons and tons of cash and you just really don't care, you're willing to wait on the big drawdown because when the bull market comes, or let's just say the hyperinflationary spiral comes, you are going to see all hard assets go crazy. But 30K Bitcoin is not the bottom. Let's put it that way. It's not going to be 30K, and it probably won't be 20K. It's probably going to get into the teens. So now's the time actually to hold cash, perhaps, you know? So, yeah, crypto's been shorted. Now, look, let's get into the more conspiratorial things. Are there other forces at play with crypto? We are seeing tons and tons of stuff coming out more about the CBDCs, and it does make me wonder a lot of different things, what they're going to be doing, how exactly they plan on trying to implement these. This is what I'm trying to figure out. If you guys have some ideas of how you think this is going to occur, I'm really interested because I can see them setting it up. They crashed crypto. Is this an excuse for them to jump into the crypto market and heavily, heavily regulate it to try to control all the crypto stuff? I mean, we know that that every country is trying to do their own sort of CBDC. I mean, Russia is tying the ruble, at least domestically, to gold, but it seems as if they're developing their own blockchain currency as well. I'm not, necessarily nefarious. I don't have necessarily nefarious feelings about a digital ruble, but I don't think it's not the World Economic Forum CBDC, whatever that is, but it's interesting to try to figure this out. How are they going to convince people to do the bait and switch? This is the thing, guys. I gotta tell you this. So the crypto market tanks. They get a lot of people out of the crypto market as a result. Does that mean that they can then control people getting back into it because of different, rules or whatever that they create? Okay, so let's say you don't go in the crypto. What happens to the money that you have in the bank? Are they going to freeze bank accounts of individuals like they did in Canada as things heat up? This is the thing. And I guess the only thing you can really do is just diversify, because I think pretty much everybody's going to be taking some L's. It seems like every single route you take has a trap. The gold silver markets are manipulated, and maybe they'll try to do some kind of confiscation like they did in the 1930s. Is crypto going to be heavily regulated? Exchanges shut down? What's going to be the situation with that? How are they going to try to stamp it down? Are they going to take money out of people's bank accounts or freeze those bank accounts like they did to Russia's assets? We have this market crash. If you're in crypto or if you're in the stock market, it's going down. We also have a housing market bubble. So you have a hard asset in your property, but that very well could go under too. It's really difficult to find where exactly is the safe haven going to be. Chidariot, crash the economy, give people cash food stamps via CBDC to usher in total control. You're probably right that that's going to be an element. I mean, the food shortage is obviously being used to create some need for people to look to the government as a savior. And so if they say, well, people can only get access to these things on CBDCs, the big question for me is just how do they... I mean, look, they're going to create food shortages. They're going to create problems. But how are you supposed to... I guess maybe I'm being naive on this, but I don't think that they're going to... I don't think tons of people in the States or even in Western Europe are going to starve. I think that there's going to be food stress, and I think in the third world, you're going to see hundreds of millions of people starve, or at least that's a possibility. From these are things that are kind of inconceivable for us in the Western world, so we have to keep that in mind. But shortages, starvation in Africa and India, China as well, have been relatively common things throughout the last century. And frankly, I mean, the last, in Africa, even the last 20 years. So from what I've understood, there really is not, there's only like a 3-month food lag there. So if there's no food able to go to Africa, you're going to see massive, massive migration of people, but you're going to see millions of people die anyway. I mean, there's just no getting around it. No one's, I'm very skeptical of people starving in America. America produces too much food. Even with them blowing up all these facilities, it's certainly statistically very, very significant, but it's not going to, look, there's just so much food here. The main issue is that so much of our food goes elsewhere in the world. So people are going to have really high prices. They're certainly not going to be able to really get much of what they want. There's going to be all sorts of frugality measures, but I don't expect to see any kind of, mass starvation here. People just getting hungry and angry. But yeah, you're going to see it elsewhere in the world. Well, that's pretty wild, Captain Horatius. The History Channel was just running a program about Nostradamus in which they predicted mass starvation in Africa, 400 million dead apparently. It wouldn't surprise me at all. It wouldn't surprise me at all. And look, let's be honest here. We can talk about this stuff. They want to kill off every group. They want to kill off every group. They want to reduce the population of the world. 13 out of 14 people. Well, whites and Asians, for the most part, got the you-know-what. But Africans didn't. So how are you going to kill off that population block? You're going to starve them to death. You can kind of see how they work this, how they get every single group, how they're going to spread the pain around. Hunger to violence. Let's see here. So, yeah, it was Chidari. It's similar to COVID release. Instead of a check, you got to sign up for the CBDC wallet. The question is, though, how many people are going to, okay, we could sign up for a CBDC wallet, but it doesn't matter unless they find a pretext to shut down our bank accounts. That's what I'm actually concerned about, is that they're going to find some reason to freeze or shut down people's bank accounts. But I don't, because otherwise it's going to be something like the banks are going to be forced and they're going to say, we're rolling over all your stuff to CBDCs per this central bank rule. That's kind of what I see happening. And then at that same time, I guess that's when people are going to either do it or they're going to move their money into crypto. These are kind of things that you can imagine happening. Just trying to war game it out. It's like you can see the plan, but how exactly they're going to execute it, it probably depends on what occurs. Yeah, if they crash the economy, banks fail. But, what about the FDIC? It's just so difficult. Where's the safe haven? And I guess maybe just got to come to terms that there isn't going to be a safe haven. War, pestilence, plague, famine, that's how it's done. Michael Young does a really good job explaining those things. I'd love to see more about that. Yeah, it's true. Banks aren't going to go anywhere. Because they will get brought back. They might fail, but they'll be resuscitated. So this is the kind of economic stuff we got to watch out for, guys. And look, I'm going to tell you something. You guys know I lost some good money on the 2020 election. I know a lot of you guys did too. And, well, one of the things that was frustrating about that is that we weren't wrong, yet we still lost because we were playing in a system they controlled. And unfortunately, I have the suspicion that we're in a similar kind of situation here where I'm not saying give up or anything like that when it comes to trying to protect yourself financially. I'm just saying that it is very, like, this is not an easy time to be a real winner because if you do something, they're liable. Like, it's very difficult to, I'm not saying don't try necessarily, but focus on survival at the end of the day. When we're done with the war, we're going to be making money and we're going to have tons of prosperity because we're going to have these people off of our back. Right now, it's probably going to be difficult, but certainly not impossible. Let me just, okay, this is what I'm trying to say. Don't take any big degen bets right now, is what I'm trying to say. If you think that you can read what's going on, then by all means go for it. Try to get a little bit of that arbitrage. But the main thing here is keep your eye on the ball. Food, shelter, items of value, a diversified portfolio of items of value, right? So you have some precious metals, you have some crypto, you have some cash, you have some money in the bank. That's where I think that we're at because any one of these things could fail. It's just the way it is. So here's the big thing here. Yes, Andrew's completely right. Don't go off grid, connect to multiple grids so you get canceled on one, you can still be connected to others. They're never going to cancel them all. And the reason is because they need to go on one of them too. Right? They have their own, I look back and in January we heard that most of the very wealthy people moved all their money into cash. That should have been the big sign. Looking at what they're doing. Just try to look at what they're doing. Don't even listen to what they're saying. Just look at what they're doing. But yeah, you want to be diversified. And the reality is that, okay, crypto's tanked. They're maybe going to tank more. But a year from now, they may be like the preponderant way that you're going to actually have any money. They may be the win. And the timing is really difficult. That's why, if you can hodl, it's probably a good idea if you have your other bases covered. But if you think you're going to need the cash, then it's probably a good idea to take this L at 30K and don't wait for it to drop down another deviation to 15, 20. Because it is going to go down. I mean, I feel fairly certain about that. It's going to go down. Jose, it's good to have you back, man. Yep, crops, animals. And the only problem, Jeff, is that a lot of these people who had that were all set beforehand. It's tough to get all that stuff together now. I mean, I planted a vegetable garden, so that'll be nice. But, let's be honest, vegetables can't live off of vegetables. So it's not going to do the job. Those guys who are further out or who have chickens, that's a bit better. I think chickens, if you can manage it, they're kind of a good investment. But look, I mean, you're going to just start, you're going to have to get started now because you're going to wish you had it this time next year. All right. So that's all this economic stuff. Let's talk briefly about the war and Ukraine. The Russians took the town of Popasnaya, and they have crossed the Severodonetsk River, which means that the Ukrainian positions in Luhansk are basically, I mean, fucked in a short term. They're not they their defensive line has been broken and now they're getting rolled up essentially. So how many more days and weeks is it going to take? This is a massive, massive strategic breakthrough. And here's the risk with it. And this is the main reason to talk about it. This regime is destroying everything. Okay, I think it's fairly apparent at this point that it's the most unpopular presidency in history, and in American history, right? And um, you know, even the bullshit polls we're looking at like 5 or 6 seats in the Senate, 70 in the House. And by the way, guys, if we didn't have a rigged system, it would be like 10 in the Senate, 140 in the House. Like it would be an enormous swing. Okay, that's more of an accurate representation. But we have a lot of stuff that's rigged, a lot of districts, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that's my opinion at least. We all know that they're gonna attempt to steal the midterms anyway. They have all this stuff with the new bird flu. Is it going to be another excuse to do mail-in ballots? I'm not saying that they're going to succeed everywhere with it. I think that there's going to be a lot of people are going to be all over them, right? They're going to be all over them, but it doesn't really matter. It's going to happen. Even still, they want to give themselves as much of a cushion as possible. And with over half the American public, actually, this is a recent poll. So 80% of the public does not want a war. 80% of the American public will not support a war in Ukraine. Over half the American public, when they asked, would you rather see Putin step down or Biden, over half the American public said Biden. So that gives you an idea of where we're at right here. So we have now this very delicate situation where, yeah, just real quick here, Jeff. It would have been like, I think if you're looking at that number, that was basically where we were saying on the conservative side where he would have won. That would have been like Michigan, Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona. I think 310 maybe would have been New Hampshire. So that would have been like people would have considered that a solid win. But by all accounts, it was much higher than that. I've heard California for sure went. You've heard these ranges. Some people said 49 or even 50 states. Some people have said 400 electoral votes. We may never know the exact number. Yeah, allegedly, PA was allegedly, right? Allegedly, 500, 600, 700,000 ballots in the days after the election. Okay. PA was, in my opinion, the most egregious one of them all. But, you can rely on Philadelphia for that. Anyway, but, that's old news. The point here is that the margins are even much higher. Well, Chidariot, we've talked about this before in the reason for waiting, and I think it's correct. If things had progressed as they wanted to, then we would have been in a civil war, and that just wouldn't have worked. That wouldn't have benefited anybody. They had really primed the public for Trump staying in power, and it would have been a disaster. It really would have been a disaster. Even as bad as things are right now, I think if we're speaking from a logical perspective, it's better that we're not in a civil war, and that the public gradually comes to terms with what's going on. This is my perspective, and I haven't lost hope. I haven't lost hope that there is going to be um, action taken. But here's the thing: I am no longer wet behind the ears as I think you guys are. There's no question. There's no question this is going on for a while. Um, we are going to have to get through this dark winter that's coming. There's not going to be help before then. I just don't see it, guys. I don't see it. I don't think it's going to happen until things are so fundamentally smashed that the public itself is ready to take action to their own hands. And I think that's when you begin to see these things happen. Maybe it's, you know, Pluto moves into Aquarius in March 2023. I could see it happening then. I could see it happening then after everybody goes through a really tough, suffering winter. You know, I just don't know what's going to happen. Like, think about this. You have big wins in the midterms, but then you also have very clearly stolen races. Is the American public going to tolerate that again? I don't know. It's not my fight. I can tell you that. I'll have my own fight at that point. But what is the public going to do? How they're going to respond? It's this building consensus. It's this stuff that we have to wait for, as Steve says here. The public has to really come to understand what we're talking about here. Not knowing all the details necessarily, but to really understand. And look, so let me track back to this Ukraine situation. We have yes, hopefully I'm going to get back to that comment. I just want to finish this thought on the war. So we have this the public increasingly turning against, I mean, increasingly, exponentially turning against the government here. So how do they even try to get people somewhat behind them, give them some sort of cover, at least from a narrative standpoint, that people are behind them? That's going to be escalation of the war. I think it's getting, I'm not going to say it's certain yet, but I'm going to say we're looking at 80% chance. You know, these things are bullshit. I think it's likely, let's put it that way. I think it's likely, I've said it before, but I think it's more and more likely that as this situation in Ukraine deteriorates, we are going to see NATO get involved overtly. And everything that they've been doing, you know, people in Russia are getting pissed off that Putin's not responding to this stuff. But this is not, he understands, I think, what's going on. And he's a level-headed person. He's actually, you know, he's a Libra. So he's super, you know, always splitting the difference. But he knows that, you know, they're attacking Russian towns and cities. They're, you know, they're doing all these provocations, you know, with Russian POWs and, you know, that activist dumping blood on the Russian ambassador in Warsaw. These are all attempts to provoke Russia into an aggressive response against the West, which they then will use as a pretext to get involved in the war. You know, them bragging about sinking the Moskva. Russia's had restraint, I think, because they understand that even though they probably will go to war, that they don't want you know, they're going to benefit based on how the populations in the West respond. So, but I think as this escalates and escalates, I think you're going to see some action. You're going to see some NATO boots on the ground in Western Ukraine. Ukraine's been attacking Transnistria, doing terror attacks over there. They're going to escalate into it, and I think the U.S. maybe will get involved at least with air power because it's unlikely NATO is going to feel comfortable advancing without it. I don't know how soon it's going to be. It could be actually very soon, or it could be later on. The only reason I say it could be relatively soon is because you would think that a reason to act now, Poland in the next 2 weeks sends soldiers into Western Ukraine, that would be done under the pretense of, they would want to try to relieve pressure on the Ukrainian soldiers in the Donbass. You don't want to get involved before they're all gone. You want to get involved while they can still absorb a front. They can still absorb Russian troops. So if NATO wants to get kinetic, they probably want to get kinetic sooner than later, because if all those Russian forces dealing with the Donbass pocket are no longer preoccupied, then there's a big advantage there. So I think that the chances of the war escalating are very, very likely. And NATO's going to lose the war. I mean, there's just no question about it. There's no question about it. I mean, did you even see right now in Congress, they're like making a big stink about the F-35 because it doesn't work. I mean, the military-industrial complex is such fucking grift. They're not even, the things that they're producing don't even work. All these javelins and stuff that we've been sending over to Ukraine, they don't even work. They're not working. There's tons and tons of reports on this. Ukrainians are just dumping them on the side. I mean, how much money did we spend developing this shit only to have it be broken up by Russian electronic warfare? I think that's the reason why they can't target, because of Russia's able to block the electronic warfare. I mean, it's wild. So, guys, we got some fun stuff on our hands. I'm gonna go and look up through these comments now, real quick. Let's see. Olivia Rodrigo, the one where she clearly has a demon. I did further research. It appears that it is only noticeable when she's in public. There are other videos of her. It doesn't seem quite as obvious. Seems quite recent. Noticing the same looking eyes on various people, not just celebs. It's super subtle. Don't know how to describe it. Yeah, these are the demons, and they're revealing themselves more and more. And there's a lot of reasons that people believe that they are doing that. Part of it has to do with the consciousness shifting, or them getting more and more aggressive. They're especially angry about Roe versus Wade because, look, they're trying to cut off our food source, then, that's cutting off their food source. This is a matter of life and death for a lot of these entities. So, yeah, I mean, but the one thing to know is that when somebody has a demon in their eyes, it's not always apparent. It's not always visible. You could it's like a flash, and it's certain moments, and then you can see it really clearly. You're like, whoa, shit. Like that Pfizer CEO. I mean, I think we saw at one point his all that crap. It was a reptile, right? We could actually see the demon sort of appear there. But it's not like he's always like that. It's just at certain moments, and you can see the flash. And photographs are actually, sometimes photographs or videos sometimes capture it. So. And Jeff, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. And this goes back to the bank account things. They did that in Canada with the trucker convoy, which I think may have been a trial run for them. They wanted to test it and see. But this whole thing, are they going to, what they do all this stuff and then they have the justification to respond. And that's the question is, what's going to happen. What's going to happen when that occurs? And I don't know the answer to that. I just don't. But I think we can certainly see the only thing, like, midterms stolen. It's hard not to see a lot of these people decide to go like 1776. It's hard to see it not occurring. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not involved with any of that stuff. We're just having a conversation about where we see things going. We've been aware of this stuff for a while. I mean, it's like it almost doesn't even get you angry anymore. You know what I mean? It's like this is what's happening. This is what's happening, and you know, ride the wave, right? Ride the wave as best you can, because there's nothing you can do to stop it. And I understand these people now throughout history who have either tried to ride the wave or try to get out of the way, because if you try to stand in the face of the wave, you're going to get crushed. You're going to get crushed. Yes, Hopeful, can you DM me some of these things on Twitter? I would appreciate taking a look at it. This is interesting stuff. Olivia Rodrigo gets ready for Met Gal. Yeah. Adam Schiff, no question. Absolutely no question. Yep, no one talks about Ukraine anymore. It's all row. Well, they're starting to bury the conversation in Ukraine because it's obvious the Ukrainians are losing the war. I mean, these people, these clowns, they tried to take Snake Island, and I've heard different reasons for that. Is it propaganda purposes? Snake Island is pretty useless. To be honest, it's a pretty useless piece of land. I mean, some people will try to make some strategic arguments, but let's be honest. At this point in the war, it's fucking useless. And so they sent multiple helicopters over there to try to take the islands, and Russia wiped them all out. And then the Ukrainians posted videos of their own helicopter getting wiped out, and they said it was a Russian helicopter getting wiped out. I mean, it's just remarkable propaganda. But yeah, really, they've stopped talking about it because, if you can't spin it in a positive way, why even discuss it? So, anyway, guys. Oh yeah, you're thinking of Jeff. You're thinking of Harari or whatever, the the guy who wrote *Sapiens*. Which, by the way, when I was reading *Sapiens*, everyone was all about *Sapiens* years back. I didn't mind, although now when I look at it, it's obviously incorrect. But about like his descriptions of early men, I was like, oh, it's kind of interesting. Once he got into like the civilization part, I was increasingly like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Like, it was really bizarre explanations and in a bizarre way to approach various things. And I didn't get why he was getting all hyped up. Well, now you know why I got hyped up. Just like Fukuyama got hyped up. I mean, they just take their people who espouse their ideas, paid to espouse their ideas, and then they say, oh my God, this is the best piece of literature out there. And then, social proof. And then so you read it and you're like, oh yeah, I guess maybe. Yeah, well, a lot of people, yes, hopeful, did get brainwashed, and it doesn't matter where they stood before. You really are dealing with a subset of the population that is indistinguishable maybe from zombies in terms of how they think about things. It's kind of like, so long as you don't go too fast, you can still go pretty fast at this point. But I mean, I've made a joke about this before, but I think if Biden made an announcement about how we need every man who, I don't know, let's pick something. a certain you take part of their target demographic that okay, this is a softer one. Let's do this. This is a softer one that we need men and women to get vasectomies and to get their tubes tied. I think that there's plenty of guys who would do it. I think you'd have hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people maybe, if that campaign was continued, who would, doesn't matter if they thought they wanted kids before, they would go and get their tubes tied, they get vasectomies. I think, you could maybe even take it further. You could say that they need to get their genitals cut off. And I think that there would be some people who would do it. You wouldn't get the same numbers as if you were to get vasectomies and tube tied. People would do it. I mean, you could tell them, you're telling them right now that their kid should get a sex change when they're 5. People are doing it. Okay, I don't want to amplify the number of it, but parents are certainly, that's an extreme example for now, but parents are maybe allowing hormonal treatment for their younger children. There's certainly, there's a lot. The brainwashing is extremely deep. And look, we said it before, and I'm going to have to sign off because I'm throat's getting beaten down here. Trauma-based mind control, the only way that this gets broken is that the trauma has to be greater. That it has to be greater. And we'll see what happens with, you have Americans die in the field, carrier groups sunk. Because let's be honest, if NATO declares war on Russia, China will invade Taiwan. If this moves from a proxy war to a hot war, I think you're going to see China jump in because they're going to realize, this is the time's now. And it's been long speculated anyway that China and Russia have a mutual defense pact that's been secretly signed. So we'll see if that's a reality. And, enjoy the show, although I hope not, because our American servicemen shouldn't have to die for this. No one should have to die for this, and yet people are dying. So you have that great tragedy and humiliation, and you have the economic collapse, the depression, followed by currency debasement. And then you have, who knows what happens with the jab. That's still an open question, just how bad it'll be. Children of men situation for those groups over time. Anyway. Do I think they got rid of Kevin Samuels? I don't know if they got rid of Kevin Samuels. It's actually a really interesting question. He was quite influential, and we know that they can kill people with heart attack weapons. People have also speculated it was the jab. It could have been anything. He was a healthy guy, but he's in his 50s. People die of heart attacks in their 50s, and they died of heart attacks in their 50s for a while. So who knows with that. It's a good speculation, though. It wouldn't surprise me. I think Tate is good. But as if you guys needed to know, those charges were not about, they were all bullshit with the girls. It had nothing to do with that. I won't say anything else. It had nothing to do with that. It did have to do with them targeting him, though. So he's certainly aware. There's no question about it. All right, guys. Well, as always, I love you, and we'll see what happens. We got a lunar eclipse in a few days, 16th, so we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. As always, love you, Cova Cabal family, and we'll speak soon.